to the Lincoln Theater. I am Susan Bradford, the Executive Director of the Lincoln Theater. Tonight we have Community Conversations. This is one of our signature programs here at the Lincoln Theater, and we're so glad that you're able to share this important conversation, corporate, community, the relationship. The Community Conversations is about touchy but important conversations, how we talk about what is concerning to the community, what is important to the community, how we bridge gaps, how we close the gap on understanding and tolerance, and finding those common places to have safe discussions. So we're really excited about our program tonight. Here's a little bit of housekeeping. Just silence your phones, of course. Also, we are seated in our social distancing here. We ask that you stay in your seats as far as that's concerned. And then also during our Q&A, we have our mic here to my right, to your left, to ask your questions from there. We ask that during the program that we have our community cards on the chairs here. If you would like to learn more about the Lincoln Theater, take one of those cards with you. If you're kind of old school, please fill out your card in the back there. And so with further ado, we're happy to have our moderator here at the Lincoln Theater, our former anchor and news anchor, Mr. Jerry Revish. Our moderator is one of the most respected, beloved television journalists of Central Ohio. Even after retiring from the anchor desk almost 2 years ago, Jerry Revish brought us the news from WBNS TV for 40 years. He covered all the big stories: war in the Middle East, the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He interviewed all the great newsmakers, including President Barack Obama and Nelson Mandela. Jerry is an ordained minister, pastor of the Unity Temple Church of God in Christ, and in August he became the chaplain for the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. We're so lucky to have him with us tonight, Jerry Revish.
Thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate that. It's good to be here with everybody. Over the past few decades, the term corporate social responsibility has become more than just buzzwords for many companies. By definition, corporate social responsibility is a self-regulating business model that helps a company to be socially accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and the public. Corporate America is faced with the issue of how best to achieve shared goals for both the company and the community it serves. It can be challenging to know just what to do and where to begin. But taking one step at a time, both inside the company and in the community, a journey of discovery and learning can begin. In this community conversation, we'll discuss the steps to begin to build, or in many cases, continue to build constructive relationships. We have a great panel with us tonight. Robert Bo Chilton. Bo is CEO of Impact Community Action, one of the leading social service agencies fighting poverty here in Franklin County. Impact serves more than 25,000 customers a year, offering assistance in employment, job training, housing, utilities, and much more. Denise Robinson is with us tonight. Denise is president and CEO of Alvis House, Alvis Incorporated. Alvis provides programs for people impacted by justice involvement, behavioral health issues, and for those living with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. Devin Schaefer is with us tonight. Devin is vice president in the legal department at Cardinal Health, supporting Cardinal's mergers and acquisitions functions, information technology, the Cardinal Health Foundation, and other areas. And Mike LaRocco. Mike is president and CEO of State Auto Insurance Companies. He became head of State Auto in 2015 and has led the transformation of State Auto's culture, the development of a new strategy, and the rollout of a new technology platform. Welcome all. We're going to start our questions now with our corporate panelists tonight. And Devin, we'll start with you. What is your company's philosophy on corporate responsibility as it relates to the Central Ohio community?
Yeah, it's a good question. You mentioned the Cardinal Health Foundation. That's the arm that our philanthropic arm, where we give back to the community. And I feel like we have a really strong track record in that regard. We really try to focus on impact because, we only have, I know we're a huge company, but when we talk about what we're giving, we want to make sure that where we give, we can see impact, see change and see how we are changing the community. And that's something that we've really been focused on is, not only seeing that impact, but also getting more engaged. So doing things like this, for example, of actually being out in the community, seeing who you are looking to serve, and making sure that there's a real connection there.
You can't serve everybody, so how do you determine who you're going to go with and who you're not?
Yeah, so our foundation has a board of senior leaders within the company. And so we, as you probably are aware, we get a lot of solicitations for giving. And so we have senior folks who, operate by majority rule when they're evaluating proposals. And, we do try to create a framework, though, so that we have some type of strategy and it's not scattershot. But within that framework, the senior leaders have discretion to choose which particular initiative that we want to support.
Okay. Mike LaRocco, the same question. What's your company's philosophy on corporate responsibility in the Central Ohio community?
Yeah, our philosophy, really, everything kind of begins with our culture. Our culture is built on a foundation of trust and respect. So we trust and respect our associates to do the right thing. And the culture that we build inside of the company, we take outside of the company as well. So our view in terms of our communities in which we live and work is that we're about more than just a P&L, that it matters to us to make the places where we live and work better. And so it's very important to us, it's essential to us that giving back to the community, that philosophy, as you suggest, is kind of part of who we are. So we want to make sure we emphasize the importance of helping others who are less fortunate than ourselves. And so that philosophy is built into the culture. It's how we treat one another inside the organization. And that philosophy goes the exact same way outside of the organization as well.
And so how do you find the people or organizations that you're going to support?
Yeah, well, as Devin said, there's sadly more need than there is both time and money. But we have kind of an approach where we try to stay focused. We're not the largest organization in the Central Ohio area, so we want to try to be as focused as we can with our help. So we focus on education. We focus on food safety and food security, and we focus on individuals who are in an area where we need to bring them out of homelessness and into a more secure environment. And so as we face all the need in the Central Ohio area, we do our best to direct our decisions to that space. We have a group of associates and some of the members of leadership who are part of a group that makes a determination as to where the money goes. But the other thing that we really emphasize is not just the financial contribution, but also kind of giving back from a labor standpoint. So we really encourage our associates. We have offices in other parts of the country as well. They're encouraged to bring forward organizations that they feel need help, and we do everything we can to kind of roll up our sleeves and do some physical labor as well, so that it kind of spreads the opportunity. But again, as Devin said, there's just sadly much more need than there is, as you two probably know better than I, than there is time or money. So it's always frustrating that you can't do more.
Thank you. And we're going to bring in our nonprofit representatives here tonight. I mentioned Alva's House because I'm old enough to remember when it was Alva's House. It's Alva's Inc. now. I want to go to you, Denise Robinson, to talk about how difficult has it been to form the kind of relationships you need or want with local companies?
So I would think that it hasn't been as difficult as most people think. And it's because what we really try to do is to take a look at the company's philosophy and what their focus is, where their philanthropic goals are, and to see if it fits with the populations that we serve. I always say you don't just go to a company to get money just to get money, because it has to be something that really sits with our organization. Our clients really need to be able to take advantage of not only the dollars, but also of the things like Mike talked about, coming out to organizations and doing that volunteer work and participating where it really, really helps. And so it hasn't been as hard. It's kind of like, in some cases though, it's kind of like a first date or a blind date where you know, it could go one way or the other, you know? And so it's really nice if you have that blind date and somebody has connected you, if you didn't know them, and then that connection, you know, comes into a relationship. But it has to be a good relationship, not just a relationship.
Yeah, well, keeping that dating metaphor going there for a moment here, we're talking about being attracted to someone, some company that you could give something to and could get something back from.
Yes.
So how do you decide who you're going to date?
Most times, what a lot of companies, they don't realize the connection with our organization. You know, because I work with persons that have been involved in the criminal justice system, persons that have addictions, women that have been in human trafficking. A lot of organizations, that's not their primary giving. And a lot of times in the past, it would be kind of like, it doesn't really fit. Now it really fits. And there's reasons why it really fits, because what we realize and what most companies realize now, people are people. No matter what the situation is, number one, but number two is that everyone needs help. And if we are good stewards, which I know we're good stewards of resources that any company gives to us, that we want to ensure that we're getting the best outcomes. And as long as we're getting the best outcomes, then I think that that date, if you will, is a good match.
Okay. Well, Bo, we want to ask you the same question. How do you decide who you're going to approach for some help?
Absolutely. We look for partnership. So Mike mentioned the strong culture that they've set at their organization and how that extends out into the community. We're very clear about the culture of our organization. We are very mission-centered. And so our mission is to fight poverty by providing hope-inspiring help and real opportunities for self-sufficiency. So we always seek with our customers to be in partnership versus patriarchy or paternalism, and we seek corporations who have that same philosophy to be in partnership. Mike also said something that was very important. It's not just about the check or the financial support. What we really want is true partnership. And so we want to create opportunities where our customers can benefit from all of the resources that corporations have to offer. An example of that is we had Taft, and I got to give credit to Janika Pierce Tucker, the managing partner at Taft, who had a volunteer day, and they brought 25 lawyers over to our place so that all of our participants could get some legal advice, get set up, and I will tell you some of our staff took advantage of that as well. But really, that's what it means to go beyond just the check, to be in true partnership. I'll tell you another great partner for us, and I have a board member here in the audience, Marquita Franklin with AEP. AEP has been a tremendous partner for us. We provide the home energy assistance program, so we help with utilities. And so all of those people who are in jeopardy of being disconnected, we're working with AEP to help with those bills so that they can keep their energy and electric on. Beyond that, though, what we know is that AEP had a significant amount of people who were retiring. And so they talked about the need to replace folks, especially in the line work. Anticipated, I think this was a couple of years ago, about 22% of their workforce was going to be retiring. Not even sure how the pandemic has also impacted that. But what we wanted to do is take our workforce development program. We have a skilled trades program working in the construction trades, but we wanted to create pipelines for our customers to be able to take advantage of those jobs. And so those are the kinds of partnerships that go beyond just the financial assistance, but true partnership in every sense of the word.
And it sounds like the folks that are giving the money or the companies that you're involved with are also getting something back from you as well and from your people.
Absolutely. We think it should be mutually beneficial, and that's what we look for. I'm reminded of a segment I saw on 60 Minutes in which Jamie Dimon, president of Chase, talked about their efforts in Detroit. And he said, you know, it's one thing for us to give a check. He said, but beyond that, we want to be in partnership and provide the technical assistance. So in the city of Detroit, there's an initiative to help build wealth, particularly for those who have typically been disenfranchised. And what he said is we have the technical expertise and the data analytics to understand what businesses will be successful in certain neighborhoods. And so we want to lend that to help build those entrepreneurs so that they can be successful. So we're always looking for partnership that's mutually beneficial.
Thank you. Mike, we're going to go back to you now for another question to our corporate panelists tonight. How do you determine which areas or community concerns you will support? I mean, how do you decide what I'm going to fund and what I'm not going to?
Yeah, a lot of that goes to our, we have an amazing leader of our community initiative. She happens to be in the audience. I think I see her out there, Stephanie Meredith. And Stephanie really takes the lead on that, right? So Stephanie is the face of State Auto to the community. She's the one that interacts. And again, we have areas that are we really have to focus on. Again, the education and the food security and homelessness, those types of issues. And so we really try to stay connected to those so that we can make sure the time and money that we do have is as effectively spent as possible. But each one of our senior leaders also joins a community organization as a board member. And so part of their responsibility is to be a board member of a community organization. And that allows us to also have someone there that we can give back through those individuals as well, through support of that organization. So we really try to stay as focused as we can and help as much as we can, because our job in our organization is to try to just make a difference. And I want to comment on Bo's point. This is definitely a two-way street. The benefit that our associates get from volunteering and from participating within the community with all these amazing organizations, they can take as much time as they want throughout the course of the year to volunteer and to help. And so we encourage them to take time. They can do that through their work days, and that is very meaningful as well.
Thank you. I want to go back to Devin now. Cardinal Health, same question there. Who makes the decisions on who you're going to go with, and how do you decide this is a good fit for us, that isn't?
Yeah, so we have a lady named Jessie Cannon who is the head of our foundation. And so Jessie's sole job is to get out in the community, figure out who great partners will be. So I would say that she does the vetting, if you will. We obviously have the larger partners that we work with. You think about United Way, people know those. I think Jessie does a really good job of getting out in the community, connecting with smaller organizations. You mentioned to have great stewardship that we may not know about. Jessie will bring those to us. And then we then have the opportunity to get connected with an organization that, if you're not from Columbus, you would never hear about. And so, we have the larger recipients that you know of, but we also have a really good system that, in my opinion, allows us to identify the smaller organizations that are, quite impactful.
So having scouts that kind of know the lay of the land is important.
100%, because I'm a transplant. I moved here from Chicago 6.5 years ago. I don't care how active you want to be in the community. It's impossible, with the family and work to understand all the moving pieces. So having someone like Jessie who's willing to get out in the community and do that front end work, I think makes us more efficient in that regard.
Thank you. I want to stay with our corporate guests for just another question here. Mike, what kind of impact, if any, does your community involvement have on your employees? How does it affect
It's
the folks you work with?
huge. I mean, again, when you have a culture that is really all about giving back, and you have a culture of trust and respect where we always put family first, the job always comes second. And when you talk about family and community, those words mean nothing unless your actions back up those words, right? So our actions in terms of encouraging our associates to volunteer, encouraging our associates to participate in activities. We have an amazing event that we do with Alvis at the end of every year where women who are in treatment and who are coming through the typically opioid addiction with their children, which I think is an amazing program that Alvis has. We hold a holiday party for them. And so they come in, one of our associates dresses up as Santa Claus, but there's stations where they can make gingerbread houses and they all get a gift. And the number of associates that are just there, most of them to help, but a lot of them just to get just this amazing energy from that evening. Words can't describe that, right? And so, again, when you say the community and family, all of that comes before the corporate side of it. Again, it means nothing unless you back it up. And so, through our actions and through our community activities, I think our associates they're better people as a result of the work they do in the communities.
Devin, do you agree that the involvement by the employees really broadens them and gives them a bigger scope and vision of what's going on in the community and the people that they're helping?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we really look at it as a development opportunity. So when you're able to participate on a board, I mean, you're learning corporate governance, you're understanding how another organization outside of Cardinal Health works. And it gives you that energy because, again, you move around, you're in a new city. It's a great way to get connected and to know people in the community who care about the same things that you care about. We even, for any Cardinal Health employee who's a member of a board, Cardinal will give like $3,500 annually to that organization. So, I mean, it's just I think just a thoughtful approach to the situation, and it is a development opportunity. So we get to give to this organization, but if we have young talent within the org that is interested in community involvement, that's a great opportunity for them to understand that landscape and get that experience.
I suspect all of that you both men are talking about is part of that diversity and inclusion that we're all seeking now. It gives you an opportunity to understand what that means close up.
Absolutely. I mean, you're seeing sometimes parts of the city that you didn't realize had the struggles that it did, or you're seeing individuals who are living a lifestyle that is so much different than the one you may go home to every day, and it gives you an appreciation of what the reality is of the entire community of Columbus, that your piece of that community of Columbus is just a small piece. When I returned to this city after, I grew up in Ohio, went to Ohio State a lifetime ago, but when I returned to Columbus, 6.5, 7 years ago, it was great to see all the progress the city had made. But there are a whole bunch of folks that got left behind all that progress, and the poverty level in the city is too high, and the loss of children at a young age is too high, and so seeing that and understanding that broadens people's perspectives in a way that talking about it just can't do. You've got to get your hands out there, and you've got to be part of those communities.
Let's move now to a topic that affected all four of you and your business and your activities, the COVID pandemic. Denise, talk to us about how the pandemic affected your corporate and community relationships.
So, Alvis, we were fortunate. We had a crisis plan that included a pandemic. So we felt very prepared. We had lots of PPE. We had a plan that you do this, you do that. This is what your job is. However, we weren't prepared for the length of time that COVID presented itself to us. And so it was very difficult, but we had staff and IT department that turned on a dime. When you are working with people's lives, you can't stop. We never closed our door one day. You can't stop because people still need their treatment. People still have to have their needs met. And so it was very difficult. And then reaching out to the corporate partners, and I have a board member from both Cardinal and state audit, but it was really interesting because everyone stepped up. Every corporate partner we have, and from every ABC organization that's in town, everyone stepped up to help us and to make sure that what we needed helped, and we were able to help the population. So we never closed our doors. We had to change everything, you know, like everybody else does. Like, you have to have the plexiglass, you have to have the mask, you have to have all these things. But what was really incredible for us, though, is the corporate partners. You know, it's just like, oh, you know, and it's just like you say, I always say that our organization, family is first. I say the same thing, that if you don't take care of your family, how can you take care of the Alvis family? And so, I mean, volunteers from all these corporate partnerships coming in, serving food, bringing food, I mean, it just was incredible.
Bo, same question. How did the pandemic impact?
Yeah. Well, and I want to underscore something that was shared earlier, talking about building trust and respect, and what employees of these corporations can learn through their service. For me, proximity matters. Being in touch with the people, seeing, not based on your perceptions, but the reality, it matters. And so when we look at the etymology of the word respect, spect coming from spectacle, meaning to look, read, to do it again. So respect is to look again, to look beneath the surface and actually see people. That's why it's so important to not just write the check, but to get involved, to get engaged. For us, the corporate relationships during this pandemic have actually thrived. And I'm being credited as a master fundraiser. But in fact, we were sought out. We were considered Impact Community Action, an organization that was considered essential services. And so, like Denise, our door never closed, and the majority of our staff have been coming into the office serving the public this whole time. In fact, we have a team that's been at eviction court since the pandemic started. And so they put their own lives at risk even before we had the vaccine and knew exactly what we were dealing with, because we're called upon to be those servant leaders. And so what I really appreciated about our corporate partners is I didn't even have to seek out the support. They started calling me and saying, Bo, what do you need? The Columbus Foundation has a program called Gifts of Kindness. Traditionally, we would submit an application on behalf of our client. They would decide whether or not to approve it, and then we would be able to pay them. We had a very generous donor who said, I have $500,000. We're just going to give that to you, and you decide who needs to be served. So I really appreciated that. And when I think about the goals of the Columbus Partnership and One Columbus, the goal to be the most prosperous region in the United States, right here in Central Ohio, and that's a goal I share in. I want us to be the most prosperous, and I want to make sure that the people I serve can share in that prosperity.
How did you have to change the way you do business because of the pandemic? Did you, and how about staff? Was it a little arm twisting to get them to get their shots, or were they stepping up and getting it done?
So a little bit of arm twisting, there. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we had to change the way in which we conducted our business. In 2019, we still, in terms of providing rent assistance, we still had an antiquated system in which people would have to call, make a phone appointment, or make an appointment through the phone, bring their documents into us, and we would serve them. And we served about 300 customers with a budget of $250,000 in 2019. In 2020, that budget was $25 million, and we served over 7,000 customers in the course of 1 year. And to date, we've served over 17,000. So we had to amplify our staffing and increase our infrastructure and capacity to serve. That meant we had to switch to an online system. We ran into a lot of challenges with people who didn't have access to technology or weren't digitally savvy. And so we had to make accommodations for that. We engaged a number of partners throughout the community to make sure that we had multiple access points for people to go and be served. So it was a tremendous shift, And it wasn't the prettiest. We were literally building the plane as we flew it, but we were able to meet the need for customers, and we continue to make it more efficient. In terms of getting the vaccine, that is something that we have strongly pushed because our staff is so in tune with the general public that they're getting exposed. And so we really have pushed vaccines. We require that everyone be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. The majority of our staff have been vaccinated, but we still have some who are hesitant. We understand that, but we're starting to see even some of our staff who have been fully vaccinated and are being exposed, and we're seeing some breakthrough. So it almost feels like we're right back to where we were at times in terms of trying to protect our staff and all of our customers.
But the good thing, if they got the shot, if they get sick, they're not going to be as sick.
Absolutely.
And they're not going to die. And I think
That's
that
right.
is a real game changer. Mike, how has the pandemic impacted your work?
Well, I can tell you I've learned to really hate Zoom. I can tell you that for sure. We were really, I guess, both good and lucky. We had gone through the transformation you were generous enough to mention in my introduction. So we had become a digital company before this happened. So we were very lucky from the standpoint of being able to kind of overnight have all of our associates work from home. We were considered essential. I know that may sound strange as an insurance company, but people still have to have their cars and bodies fixed. So we never really closed the doors, but for the most part, we just had a handful of folks coming in. So we were really able to make the transition very quickly. But the thing I want to point out is, as it relates to community service, and I appreciate the kind words from the community service folks, because the thing that I saw during this is that we actually increased our giving, both our financial giving increased during COVID, and the amount of hours people volunteered. Now, in the early days, the volunteering was, people were very nervous and worried, so it was really more of a financial commitment. But as things got better, or people got more comfortable, even the physical volunteering of labor increased. But I could not have been more proud of our team of associates, the way they stepped up, because again, it takes sometimes a crisis to really see the truth of both the people that you work with, but also the reality of the environment that you live in, right? Because a lot of people knew that individuals were losing their jobs, and that individuals were facing eviction or other types of challenges. So they actually leaned in and increased their contribution. So I was very, very proud of our team.
Devin, how did the pandemic impact Cardinal's corporate and community relationships?
Yeah, from a corporate perspective, up in Dublin, people were working from home. What was really impressive were our frontline employees who were in distribution centers. I mean, people think about Cardinal Health, and there are about 4,000 people in the corporate office, but we have just a large amount of people who are in our distribution centers who were essential to the healthcare supply chain. And to everyone's point, we never took a day off. And you had people who were before the vaccine, all this stuff, just willing to go in because they understood how important their work is to making sure hospitals get the supplies that they need and the pharmaceuticals that they need. I think the corporate piece is similar to what you've heard from others. Definitely increased, giving. And I feel like any company, we respond well to crisis, right? I mean, it kind of galvanizes the team, and people get focused, and it's amazing how something that may have taken 4 weeks now takes 1 week when you have to do it. So you saw people moving into action, a sense of urgency that was, it energized. I feel like it energized the team and made you proud to be a Cardinal Health employee.
We experienced and went through the pandemic, still going through that. We also had some big-time social unrest in Central Ohio following the George Floyd killing. Marches in the street and lots of different activities. Denise, how did the social unrest of last summer affect your corporate and community relationships?
So That was a very tough time. It's still a tough time. When you think about people, our clients and our population who have so many needs and really want to participate in some of the activities surrounding it, that was really hard. That was really hard to say, no, you can't, you know. Also, we had clients whose family members were involved or got hurt or something to that effect. But with the corporate, between us and the corporate, one of the things one of the things that Alvis did was we had started a DE&I process prior to the social unrest.
What's that? DE&I?
I'm sorry, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we started that prior to the social unrest. And so all of a sudden now, most of the corporate partners are really focused on that and getting a DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion person on their staff. And what I worry about is it knee-jerk? Is it lasting? Is it something that is just as a reaction? I'm very proactive, and so is my organization is very proactive. And so I just wonder, because I don't want to be the flavor of the day. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want people to be the flavor of the day, but we've watched so many corporate partners take this on in a major way, which I'm really thankful for. I mean, I'm happy that people are doing that, but I just don't want it to die. I don't want it to die on the vine.
Mm-hmm. Well, are you seeing some interest, some activity increased because of the social unrest of last year?
Absolutely. The diversity, equity, inclusion efforts and many of the corporations and across our community have been significant. And there's been a lot of verbal and written commitments. And so I'm seeing the evidence of people genuinely wanting to get involved. I have the pleasure of serving on the board of the African American Leadership Academy, and we're an organization that really cultivates the leaders for African Americans. We want them to do well so that they can do more good, and so very happy to have a new partnership with the Columbus Partnership, who is supporting us at a level of $150,000. And so we're seeing the efforts, but to Denise's point, we want to make sure that these aren't just words that are being verbalized, but they're words to live by. And so we want to continue to work with our partners. And the thing that I say for my partners, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader, and I'm also going to quietly be the person who challenges you to live up to those things and those aspirational goals. And so, so far so good. And I feel like there's still more work to be done, and the work needs to continue.
Devin, same question. Has it become a heavy lift to get the diversity, the inclusion, and all of that from your side of the ledger here?
I mean, it's definitely a heavy lift. But you know, our CEO Mike Kaufman was really ahead of the curve on this, because before the George Floyd murder, he had already established a racial equity cabinet where I believe it's 7 of us on the cabinet, and he basically asked us, like, be my truth tellers. Let me know how you guys are thinking about things. What do we need to be doing as a company? And it was great because it was before all of the unrest. So we had already had some pretty robust discussions around what we wanted to do as an organization. But to Denise's point, we talk about the same thing internally. You know, when you have a business to run and you're focused on, you know, profitability and, you know, sustainability, all those things, it's not malicious in a lot of instances. It's just human nature. You focus on those things. And so what we said as a racial equity cabinet is, you know, we don't want this to be something that's not sustainable, that this should be something that is effective even if Mike Kaufman leaves Cardinal Health or Devin Schaefer leaves Cardinal Health. We want it to persist. And I think that's the real challenge, is keeping that sustainability and making it a part of the institution.
Mike, racial equity, diversity, inclusion, how did State Auto handle all this?
Yeah, I mean, when George Floyd was murdered, I sat down and wrote a letter to all of our associates. I came of age in '68 at the Detroit riots, and at Ohio State's campus, marching against apartheid, and watching all these events in my life happen. And in my letter, I said, I feel that my generation has failed, right? Because here we are with this event, and what I wanted to do was go beyond the meetings and the conversations in terms of at a high level. So I held 7 all-associate calls with smaller groups of associates. And during these calls, there was not a topic off limits, there was not a question off limits. I encouraged our associates who were people of color and also others who have had experience, whatever your experience was with discrimination or racism or whatever the issue was, to talk about these things. And we had a lot of tears, a lot of emotional conversations. We talked about what white privilege means and what it doesn't mean. We talked about what Black Lives means and what it doesn't mean. And, I grew up as a blue-collar kid out of Cleveland, but my parents didn't have to tell me to keep my hands on the steering wheel when I got pulled over by the cops, right? So, that's white privilege. And so when you had these conversations within state auto, and it was hard, right? Because state auto is no different than the rest of the country, right? There are people inside of our organization who are probably less open-minded about issues than others. But for 6 years, I've been saying, I don't care who you sleep with, I don't care who you pray to, I don't care what you look like, I just want everybody's going to be treated the same inside this organization. And that's what we tried to build through these conversations, was that I can't change the world. I would like to change the world, and I've got some ideas how to do it, by the way, but I can change state auto, and if by changing state auto and making it a place of true fairness and true openness and everybody's treated the same, then perhaps that'll go outside. So we had these very dynamic conversations, and to the very, very good points, the key then was, what are we going to do next, right? Because this is what happens, whether you call it the flavor of the month, right? Are we going to wake up in 2 years and see another incredibly disgusting event that gets everybody up in arms again? Or are we truly going to try to make a difference? And I think that the thing that I guess I was proud of at State Auto and proud of when I hear about Cardinal Health and other places is that corporate leadership cannot stay on the sidelines. That you cannot say, well, this is a political issue or this is a social issue. That's not the case. You are living and working in a community, and you have an obligation in that community in which you live and work to make it better. And one way to make it better is to deal with these issues straight up and have the hard conversations. And again, I don't know that we made life better outside of state auto, but I do have a strong feeling that with the things we did, and we're doing some follow-up work as well, that hopefully it'll have an impact.
Always wanting to improve, always wanting to evolve, always wanting to get better. So Denise, talk to me about, in a perfect world, what would you like to see the corporate community relationship change or improve?
I think understanding each of the human services organizations and what we provide and the populations that we deal with, because most of them are underserved in our underserved communities and underserved people. What I would like to see is that there's still an awareness, an awareness, and also that connection is easier and not hard, because we're typically, what I've noticed is we're still on the same page. We're on the same page with corporate. We want them to come in and help and volunteer and those kinds of things. We want the dollars, but we also want to show you the impact that your dollars are making. But also, I just think that in a lot of cases, we want to make sure that we're impactful. We want to make sure that corporate's impactful in our programs. And again, just like I said in the very beginning, you don't want to just go to corporate and ask for money. You want to make sure that it's something that you truly need and something that can be sustainable afterwards, because you can't get dependent on dollars, that you get from corporate. You can't depend on that. But you need to make the best impact that you can when you have it.
Thank you. Well, how would you like to see the corporate-community relationship change or improve?
We're all part of the same ecosystem, so we're interdependent on one another. And so when we talk about what does it mean to be a good corporate citizen, it means you're part of the fabric of the community. And again, I go back to partnership. We're all positioned differently, but we're all part of the same ecosystem. And so being in partnership means we work together. I think that I would like to see, and I got to say this, there's a term called the Columbus Way that we've talked about, and I can tell you that many people embrace that and love that and think it's aspirational. They talk about how giving our community is, the way in which we come with a spirit of working together. I saw the evidence of that when we talked about we're all in this together. I saw the evidence of that. However, to Mike's point earlier, there are people who have been left behind, and so they don't feel that. And so we want to make sure that we're doing a little bit more. I think our corporations here, and again, I celebrate them, I think that we do very well here in Central Ohio, but I'm asking to do even more. Let's continue that. For me, one of my favorite quotes is there's three kind of people in this world. Those who are in the game, those who are on the sidelines watching the game, and those who don't even know the game's being played. And so what I want is for all of our corporate citizens to get in the game. Don't just rest on the sidelines, get in the game. And there's one thing I said with our partners, I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader, and I'm also going to call it like I see it when it needs to be called out. And the one thing that I'll say, and it's sometimes a dirty word in some circles I'm in, I want everybody to pay their fair share of taxes. There are some who manipulate and take advantage of that, but we all benefit. This is one of the greatest countries in the world. I'm a proud third-generation veteran in the Army, and so I believe wholeheartedly in the American dream. And the only way that we're all going to be able to share in the prosperity is we all got to do our part. We all have to pay our fair share of taxes, and we all have to get in the game.
Thank you for that. Devin, let me ask you the same thing. Some changes or improvements you'd like to see in this community-corporate relationship?
Yeah, I think corporations now are struggling with this question of what our purpose is, right? Because to simplify things, it used to be to maximize shareholder value, make money. And now the conversation is morphing a bit, and you're starting to hear words like stakeholder. Those were words that you would typically hear in a nonprofit community. So I think it's a nuanced conversation. I think people shy away from it because it's nuanced, and people want to keep things simple and say, well, if we just focus on making money, then everything will take care of itself. But that's not the case. So as we start to build out these initiatives on DEI, sustainability, how we deal with the environment, we need to go ahead and make that a part of business. Like, that's not a necessary evil. It is just being a strong corporate citizen. And the funny thing is, when you're in the organization, people have no problem talking about this stuff in a helpful way. It's just, I can't quite get my arms wrapped around why it's so difficult for people to come to terms with the fact that we have a responsibility as a corporate partner in the community that we're in to make it better. And it's not just about, the same way we talk about the organizations can't just focus on the check. It's not just about the money, it's about being a good steward, it's about being a leader. And so as that conversation continues to broaden, I think is a helpful conversation. There's a lot of back and forth and people see it differently, but I'm pleased with that progress and want to see it continue so that we can get on the same page and not argue over, nomenclature, and just figure out how we can be the best corporate citizens that we can be.
Mike, how do you size up the relationship now between corporate and community, and do you see any areas that need some improvement?
Oh, heck yeah. How much time I got, Jerry? No, I'll go as quick as possible. I want to go to this Columbus Way thing because it's really a bunch of crap. You were being very nice about it and I'm in the partnership, by the way, so I want to be super clear about that. But the large number of corporations in this city do really good work, and they give a lot of money. But that's not good enough anymore, and that's not enough anymore. And the problem is, The issue of, you're exactly right, Devin, the old days of saying we're about profit and we're about our shareholders or whatever, that's not good enough any longer. And if we're really going to lift up this country and lift up the people across the entire spectrum in this country, it's why, when we look at the Columbus Way and this amazing success that people in the partnership tout constantly, no one's talking about the fact that the education system in Columbus is horrific. But will we take that on as a partnership? No, because our job is economic growth. Well, I say to the partnership, and that's why I don't go to the meetings anymore, but it should be about more than that. Should we take on poverty? Well, if we have economic growth, it'll impact poverty. Well, not necessarily, because that's just not the way it works. And so if you really want to make a difference in the corporate community partnership, the corporations have to lean into these hard issues and not be afraid to take them on. And again, I want to be super clear. The majority of corporations in the city do really, really good work, and the partnership is a great organization. They've done a lot of really good things, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But there's a difference between checking that box and saying, I've given a bunch of money to Alvis or to Impact or to whatever the organization is. We're big supporters. I mean, Nationwide does amazing things all across this organization, all of which are, this Central Ohio, all of which are important. But if you really want to make a change, you've got to kind of tackle these issues more collectively, right? You've got to tackle poverty collectively. Instead of solving a problem at this school or on this issue, you've got to somehow take on the bigger challenge. And it's hard, and it's very, very difficult to accomplish, but that's the way community corporate partnerships, I think, have to evolve to really solve some of these problems. I think we're all doing a great job in our individual lanes, and it's hard because, everybody just wants to pat themselves on the back about how much money they gave, but there's bigger issues that you take on, and if you don't take them on collectively, you're just never going to ultimately solve them all.
Thank you. I don't see anybody at the mic for audience questions, so we have one? Okay, great. Come on up.
Thank you very much for the conversation tonight. I want to go to a point that you just made, Mike, when we're talking about making change and lasting change. So if you subscribe to the idea that we can't charity our way out of the problems that we have in the community, what would it take for our city, for our community, to be brave enough to invest in not just the big name or well-known entities who are doing great work, not to take anything away from them, but those individuals who are innovative, who are really at the front lines and really at that grassroots level, who may not have the platform, right, to get access to those big dollars. They may not have a voice, right? They don't have the name recognition. What would it take for our corporations to be brave enough to invest in them?
Yeah, I think and I'll start and others can jump in, but for me, I think this is the role that the partnership itself is a great organization because it brings together the CEOs of whatever the top 60 companies or something. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is to have the partnership say, we're willing to take on a hard issue where we're going to get criticized. And if that's poverty, or if that's food insecurity, or if that's education, we're willing to take that on. And if we're going to do that, we got to listen to all the constituents who have perhaps some of these smaller organizations that are doing some really innovative things and bring everybody to the table. Again, this is messy and this is not simple. But you've got to be willing to say, we're trying to collectively solve this. And if you're trying to collectively solve this, you've got to bring a broader range of people to the table besides just United Way or besides the American Heart Association, all of which are great organizations. And that's the challenge, right, is that you've got to be willing to do that and bring all those organizations to the table. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to kind of get there. But that's what I believe has to happen, and there may be other views, but I think that's one way to maybe solve that.
Other thoughts, panel?
Just real quickly, what I would love to see is an organization where you take African American talent from various large corporates, and you create a board, if you will, and put more responsibility on people like me to go out and connect with those people who don't have the platforms, because, you know, in a lot of instances, you know, say it's a community of color, you know, I'm passionate about that, right? And so I feel like the whole, and Jesse Cannon and I talk about this, a lady that's the head of our foundation, how can we empower people of color and make them decision makers because they're in the communities or they know someone in the communities, rather than it being so, the gap being so wide for a Cardinal Health, for example, and a smaller it's just tough for a Cardinal Health to ever hear about an innovative nonprofit, right? But I do think you can task people of color within Cardinal Health or Nationwide, or the list goes on, with that responsibility, and people are talented and they'll figure out how to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Kathy Yeppert. I'm with Metro Schools, and I'm also on the board here. My question is in regards to the digital divide, so to speak. So for Denise and Bo, if you're looking at your constituents now that you're serving, how are they currently using the mobile tools, their mobile phones that are available to them to access resources? And if in fact the prosperous aspect of Columbus develops in the next 5 years, do you see those services in your organization changing? And then my question for the corporate folks is, when you are looking at nonprofits, how important is it for you when you go into that organizations to see how well established they understand technology and the use of technology? So say, for example, the public school system, how they're utilizing their operating system and how they're keeping records and documenting those students, how they're served, and what type of training that they're receiving to work in, again, the next 5 years, if they're prosperous. If they're not prosperous, what are their options?
All right, good questions. Let's start with the first one about the digital divide. We'll go with Bo to answer that, and then Denise come behind him.
So certainly, that's something that we saw the evidence of, especially as we tried to pivot and go to more of an online platform. One of the nice things about the software we chose is that it was mobile friendly. So many people who did not have high-speed internet at home were able to access through their phones to get connected. I believe that broadband should be a utility, the same way we treat water and electric and gas. And so we're advocating for that to happen because it was really unfair of us to expect that the children of those who did not have access to technology would be able to keep pace educationally working from home when they did not have the tools to stay engaged. And so we've seen some slippage with some kids falling behind while others are, moving forward. So we definitely want to work with our leaders to understand the importance of making sure everyone has access.
Yeah, I think the whole project of learning at home was an education in itself, because we found out that a lot of people don't have those tools to do that. Tell us how your organization is handling this digital divide.
So it's huge. But again, right after COVID happened, our corporate partners stepped up to the plate, provided every student that we had with a device that they were able to do their education. We provided for every one of our clients either a cell phone or a device. They have to have their treatment. They cannot go without their treatment. Substance abuse, opiate addiction is very, very high. We had to make sure that they could do that. Telemedicine was huge with us. But we also had to do the education, because I think Bo pointed it out, people they just didn't know how to use the devices. And so you had to immediately get the training that they needed to be able to do that. I agree with Bo. Broadband should just, I don't even know if we should have to pay for it because, I'm on the other side of that. But I just think it should be like a utility. People have to have it. We're fortunate on my board is the chief technology person for Columbus Public Schools. And she really helped in our training and our access for our Columbus school kids that are in school. But we also had to do a learning lab, if you will, because they weren't able to go to school. Our moms, with these kids, our moms are unable to teach their kids. They're unable to be that tutor. They're unable because they're dealing with their own issues. And so we had to turn on a dime just so that we're able to use the technology.
Yeah. So, Devin, the whole technology explosion and the need to do a lot more with less, how has Cardinal been able to adjust to that?
So it's an interesting issue. So we actually gave tons of, not laptops, but tablets to students. But I'm an inner city kid myself, and I struggle with the notion of giving kids these devices when they're in an environment that's not conducive to learning, and expecting that this kid who's in this, in a home where they don't have that support, that they're actually going to use this tablet and be diligent. I'm at home with my kids every day, and I can't get them to pay attention. So in one breath, it's like I was excited that we were doing it, but to Bo, to your point about true partnership, it's like, how can we actually go and inspire these kids to help them understand this is why you need to use this tablet. Just giving them the electronics isn't the answer, but more specifically to the evaluation of organizations. I think it's tough for larger corporations or just givers, people who are in the giving community, to make that evaluation. And a lot of times, that's why it's easier to give to larger orgs, right? Because they have the internal controls, they have the infrastructure. And so that is an interesting issue that we have to solve for is if an organization is smaller and they don't have this infrastructure or this internal control, but you see them doing awesome things, how can we get over the fact that they don't have every T crossed and every I dotted, and focus on the fact that they are impactful and still be able to give in that instance, I think is a huge hurdle.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, to the educational piece, my daughter moved here recently. She's an educator. She teaches at USN right down the road here. And to your point, Bo, she teaches kids who really struggled for these last 12 months, really struggled. Parents who had to work, potentially single family, these are folks that are on the front lines, in hospitals as nurses or orderlies or in the grocery stores. And so these young kids were, she's trying to get them to learn. And so it was an additional hurdle that she struggled with overcoming. And that is another situation where we fall further behind the power curve in terms of education. The one thing about COVID that you've got to look for whatever positives you can get. And the one thing about COVID that has taught all of us is that we can work remotely and we don't have to be anywhere. So you think about the folks in Appalachia, or you think about the folks even in just part of southeastern Ohio, or even some of the folks in the cities here who don't have access to transportation. The fact that if we can make them technology literate, then they can code. And so when you ask the question about what we look for, I don't worry at all about that. That means nothing to me in terms of an organization that is particularly computer literate that we're dealing with or has the books or whatever it is. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we do is to try to bring computer literacy to the organizations that we work with. So we have a very strong program. I think it's IT core stuff or IT tech cores or something like that, where we work with young kids in the city and teach them how to code. And so we start trying to build that awareness and that intelligence around that, because that's going to allow them, again, no matter where they're at, because you're going to be able to code from wherever you want. You're going to be able to do a lot of your jobs remotely. So getting access to technology, completely agree on everybody. To me, getting broadband and getting access is so incredibly important. I do also agree with Devin. I mean, we've got to make sure that it's more than just passing out the piece of hardware. You've got to educate with it, and it's a hard thing to do. But if we don't learn from COVID and we don't benefit then from COVID, then shame on us, right? And there's a lot of lessons from COVID that should allow us to be better and should allow us in this space potentially to lean into some areas, as I say, as we're trying to solve poverty on a global basis or education. Please don't tell your board member what I said about the Columbus education system. I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. I know I have another educator out there. I am in deep doo-doo. But the truth of the matter is that, that's the kind of stuff we can do, right? I mean, we can start really digging into, how do we prepare people for, the future, so.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Chelsea Barnett. I'm also a board member with the Lincoln Theater and also president of a pending 501c3, Rewriting the Narrative, Inc. And so my one question that I will sum up the two that I had, I heard a lot about sustainability and being a straight shooter, and I kind of want to, in our nonprofit, came out of the murder of George Floyd. So that was when we, all came together and said we have to do more. Since these conversations have been happening for decades, but we still haven't seen like a large change between like everything that we've been saying here. I think we can all agree to that. How do we continue so that we can be sustainable from, I believe from everyone's opinion, just how can we as people who are trying to create all of this change and keep it for a long period of time, what in your opinion do you feel like is going to sustain us for a long period of time? And just outside, I would say outside of conversations and things like that, because I feel like we've been having there's different variations of these conversations, but they've been happening for decades. So how can we as a community, as a city, come together to be more sustainable, just to keep that top of mind of social justice?
Great, thank you. We're going to get answers from all four tonight. Let's get some thoughts here. Bo?
Well, I think the way in which we sustain this moment and this momentum for social justice is going back to what I said earlier about being in partnership. Even when Marquita raised the issue of how do we identify those grassroots, innovative, who may not necessarily have infrastructure and capacity, but how do we find them and invest in them and lift them up? Again, we got to be in partnership. And so our organization is one that we've worked with a lot of smaller nonprofits. We've served as fiscal agents for others to help give them that back shop infrastructure capacity so that they can innovate and do what they do best and create. And so if we build those linkages, those connections, if we're truly in partnership, because the thing is, we often talk about sometimes these initiatives that we have, we create these commissions and we have these big plans, and then we go out and we try and sell it to the community. And we're surprised when they don't necessarily jump on board and embrace it in the way in which we thought they would, because it's good for the community. The problem is you can't do it top down. Because if it's grassroots, if you're working with the community, if they have buy-in, if they can contribute to the conversation, you don't have to sell them on the value proposition. You don't have to sell them on how to buy in. They're going to be bought in because they helped to create it. So I think to be in partnership, let's link larger organizations who may have greater capacity with smaller ones and connect with the corporate community. Again, it's all part of the same ecosystem. And I think it's the actions. I always talk about, don't talk about it, be about it. That's what's going to sustain this momentum.
Thank you. Denise?
So I agree with Bo. It is partnerships. I call it also collective impact. And that's what's really important. I think that the collective connectivity of organizations. I do the same thing. I'm the fiscal agent for a number of organizations, and we've also done 5 mergers and acquisitions, and it was because we felt like we could give more to this small organization that was going to die. And you don't want to see it die because it's really good stuff, and so what you're talking about with the new 501c3, that is where we have to put our arms around you, because it is a good company that you're talking about, but we have to all help. There's also things like the Human Service Chamber. There's also things that that we can all be able to deliver and to help you through this process. There is not anyone I know that runs a nonprofit that's not going to be helpful. And then with the corporate partnerships, on top of that, I think there's not anyone that's not going to be helpful to you. And I think that's how you do it. Collective impact is so important.
Thanks. Devin?
Yeah, I would say just remaining hopeful. And I don't say that to be Pollyannish. I think that it is easy to focus on the fact that we've had a lot of conversations and things have not progressed as far as we would like for them to. But I actually do see change. I think the thing that's scariest for me is what are we changing into, right? Because I see progress in certain areas. I see issues in certain areas. But I know for a fact that I can do more than my grandfather could do. But at the end of the day, it's not about me being able to do it. It's like, how do we treat people in this country? And that's the part that I think is a huge issue for me, is how do we make sure that we control that narrative and are thoughtful about what we are becoming as a country? And so just remaining hopeful and taking stock of the growth that we've seen, although we do still have tons of challenges for sure. I actually see younger people, folks like yourself who are willing to step out there and start a nonprofit. I have a brother that's 10 years younger than me. His experience in America was different than mine. And so I just try to remind myself of those things so I don't lose hope, but just staying in the fight, to Bo's point, staying in the game and making sure that we're doing all that we can do to shape what we become. Because I do see with the browning of America, it's just we're an aging population. It's a lot of things that are happening on the macro level that, we will be different as a country. It's just like, what will that different look like?
Mike, I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, thanks. Whenever I'm trying to solve a problem, I look at 2 things: the scope, how bad is the problem, and what's the basis of the problem, right? And the problem is really bad. This is a country that's filled with a tremendous amount of hate right now, and so we can't fool ourselves. If you're going to solve this problem, you got to be super honest. That based on the nutcase that we had in the White House, he just exposed the reality of what's involved in this country. There is a tremendous amount of hate. There's bigotry, there's anti-Semitism, there's racial hatred. So I want to be optimistic too, but we got to be honest about the problem. Now that's one part. The other thing is understanding how we got here, and I can only assume that a number of people in this audience read the book Caste, but that's the reality. The way we got here, one of the problems is people don't understand why we're in the situation we're in. Well, are black people lazy? Are black people not as intelligent? the reality, we have more blacks in the criminal justice system on a per capita basis. Well, if you understand the caste system that's been in the United States, you understand why we got to where we got. So to solve the problem, you got to understand the scope of how bad it is, and then kind of how you got to this place. To me, the solving of it is, the reason those two things are important is you're not going to change some of these yahoos that are just who they are. There's nothing you can say or do. I mean, I can't get people to take a shot to stay away from a worldwide pandemic, and so you think I'm going to convince somebody to be open-minded about stuff, but you've got to focus on what you can do, right? And one of the things that I think is super important in this effort is, don't be so nice. You've got to be radically clear in your views. We have to be radically clear in our views in terms of what matters and how change has to come. We have to be harder. We have to be clearer. We have to be firmer. We've got to be tougher. We've got to offend some people through this process, and that's okay. Because one of the things with things like corporate involvement is, well, I don't want to talk about that controversial issue, or I don't want 20% of my employees getting pissed off at me because I took a stand on this. So from the trying to lean back into this discussion, corporations got to say, it's just the right thing to do, and we're willing to do that. And if we tick off some people, that's okay. And so getting companies to understand that through your own aggressiveness and through your own clarity is part of that. All the other stuff is important. The stuff in terms of lifting people up and educating people and having same access to food and to education for black and brown kids as you do for the rest of society. All of those things are valuable, and all of those things are important. But we're talking about really changing something that's been part of this country since the beginning, and that's not easy. And I don't say that to scare you off. You look very young. You're probably the same age as my daughters. And so fight, fight, fight. And I can say that. I don't think you need to hear that from me. But you got to understand the challenge and the scope of the challenge. But it just should make it more, we've got to be more committed to it. And people like me, quite frankly, have to enter the fight just as aggressively as people that look like you. And that's one of the issues as well, is that that's got to be a collective effort. And there are a lot of people that care deeply. This is not just a black Americans issue. This is a all Americans issue, and people see that. So give me a buzz and we can chat some, and if I can help in some way, I'll be happy to do it. But God bless you. Keep fighting a good fight.
That's great. We've had a great discussion tonight. I so appreciate all of you. And maybe one final thought as we close this out. As you see us end 21 and look at 22 in front of us now, what's a thing or some things that you found in 21 that will help you in your work in 22? Any issue, any experience that you've had that is going to help you be even better in what you're doing in the new year? Bo, we'll start with you, and we'll go this way.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I'll say one thing I discovered in 21 is I need to know who Mike is. I appreciate your voice. I'm not accustomed to seeing people in your position advocate so strongly, so I appreciate that. We've built a lot of allies, and I think that that's what it's really going to take, a collective effort to have the open and honest conversation. I've intimated that when I'm a partner, I'm the biggest cheerleader, but I'm also going to challenge. And so I appreciate hearing those words, because we do have to challenge one another. We have to lean in on what is uncomfortable, because on the other side of that, the shared struggle is going to make us stronger and closer. And so I've learned that. I've learned that I found allies in some unlikely places, and we have to keep an open mind.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, it's slowing down, right? Because we did not go into the office every day. And just, I lost people that I worked with, the lady in a nonprofit. She contracted COVID and passed. And so it really made me take a step back. As a young black male growing up in this country, I've seen a lot. And that's why I talked about that hope, is because it's like you can only do so much with the anger. And it's just trying to take a step back, appreciate my family, appreciate my friends, appreciate the opportunity that we have to change things. Not to say that we'll be successful, but just appreciating that opportunity and connecting with people like this. I mean, that keeps me energized, because you turn on the news channel sometimes and it can get pretty depressing. So yeah, just taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and appreciating the opportunity to just move the ball forward as much as I can. Yeah.
Thank you. Denise.
So I think what I've learned and what I hope to move forward into 2022 is that people do care. So many times you don't think they care, but people do care. And I think that what I've learned too is to slow down, not really, but, but to slow down and really talk with people and really talk to them and not about work. It has to be about them. And I think that that's what's really important, is to know a person, know what they're going through. You know, we say it, and you being a minister, we say it all the time, you don't know what anybody's experiencing. Right. You don't know what their story is. And so I do think that caring is what I'm going to take care of in the future.
Good. Mike?
Yeah, I turned 65 a week or so ago, and age has never been an issue with me, and birthdays have never meant much to me, but for some reason, this one just kind of clicked, right? I mean, I'm coming to the end of my professional career as well, and it's just kind of that realization of just as trite as it sounds, just the preciousness of life. I think, just like Devin, I've lost people through COVID and through, again, just getting older, and that preciousness of life has caused me to be, believe it or not, even more, clear in my beliefs and my views, and people ask me a question, or if I see something I don't think is right, I'm going to say something, right? I don't just hold back or say, well, that's just so-and-so. So I think that is kind of the thing that in this year has kind of elevated my commitment going forward, and my realization that I only got a certain number of turns of the calendar, and so I want to enjoy every one of them in every single way.
Mike LaRocco, Denise Robinson, Derek Schaefer, and Bo Chilton. Thank you so much tonight. We appreciate you all. We're now back in the hands of Suzanne Radford.
Thank you, Jerry. I just want to share a little bit of the takeaway that I received from listening to this really impactful, informative conversation. One of them is better together, stronger together, smarter together. The other one that was threaded through all of your responses was humanity. And when we work from that place, both in our corporate and our community spaces, it automatically just opens us up to serve and to provide. The Lincoln Theater is a beneficiary of many corporate programs and many corporate giving here. I just must give a shout out to State Auto. They have been with the Lincoln Theater since we opened in 2009. And they have never wavered, actually just has increased their support that way. So we are seen as a community theater, but I also know that in that service that we do here, we're also looking at our corporate partners in some non-traditional ways to support that community of humans. And so I have to just give a plug to the art community and the artistic community, which gives balance to both areas, both in community and both in corporate. And I think that we are a stellar place to have that balance be created and conversations to be had. So with that, in my position, I say to you, if there's anything that the Lincoln can do to help provide a space, a place, or to encourage or to share in our mission and share in our ideals, don't hesitate to call. I just want to say that, again, just on behalf of our board president, Marlon Moore, and our wonderful program and events committee, We thank you for coming, Jerry. I know if she's watching this, Angela Pace, I have to give her the credit for your script and for the conversation and for the questions. So I'm putting that on national record, public record.
Thank you, Angela.
That Angela has done that, and also her leadership as chair for our Program and Events Committee. We just want to thank you again. I'm sure this conversation will continue in our spaces. We can be fueled to have those conversations and keep them up. I think if we don't talk about it, we don't know what the solution can be. And your T-shirt, Mike, is indicative to where you are and your drive for doing what's right and speaking about those hard conversations on that. Denise, we serve, our community and families that are struggling. So thank you for that. And Devin, this is new. Our partnership or our conversation is new, but I'm excited about what's in store for Cardinal Health. And Bo, you're just the guy. So thank you all. Have a good evening to our community. This is recorded from the Columbus TV, so it will be shown on our TV channels there. And yes, thank you again for the Community Conversations, Lincoln Theater. Good evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.